So clearly this morning we're turning our thoughts to love. And I'm thinking about the message of love on our playlists and on the radio. Here's how one artist expressed her expectation and experience of love. She's saying rule number one is that you got to have fun. But baby, when you're done, you got to be the first to run. Rule number two, just don't get attached to somebody you could lose. She's not the only one singing about love through the lens of jaded and broken experiences with love. But as I'm listening to these songs, it seems to me there's a common thread coming through. For many people, love seems to boil down to emotional utility. Love is whatever makes me feel good. Or to sexual access. Love is whatever gets me to the bedroom. Or self-discovery. Love is whatever benefits my personal journey. Like it or not, these are the culturally ingrained definitions of love. And so Christians have their own thinking to do about love. We have our own biblical definition of love to discover and to embrace. Christians have been doing this for generations, even against the grain of other cultural definitions of love. In fact, according to one New Testament scholar, since the early days of Christianity, Christians have been discovering and championing a true and genuine definition of love. A love for the utterly unworthy. A love that proceeds from a God who is love. It is a love lavished on others without a thought whether they are worthy or not. It proceeds from the nature of the lover, not from any attractiveness in the beloved. That seems like a very powerful kind of love, doesn't it? And my question this morning is how or where do we learn a powerful love like that? How on earth do we learn how to love the unlovely? How do we learn to love simply for love's sake, not because there's an attractiveness about the person or the object that we are loving? With these questions in mind, let's jump into our text. And since we are just jumping into the text, it's good for us to know the context. What was going on in Corinth? What was it that made the Apostle Paul write this famous passage on love? Broadly speaking, the church in Corinth had more or less gone off the rails. If you read 1 Corinthians, it is a church that has gone off the rails. They were doing all kinds of crazy. They were immature, they were disorderly, they were making a mega mess of Christian life and Christian worship. And to help them to get back on their feet, the Apostle Paul wrote to them to set a few things in order. And one of the things that needed attention was their absolute obsession with the spectacular but debated aspects of Christian life. They were obsessed with the spectacular but debated aspects of Christian life. For example, if someone among them said that they were a prophet and had a word from God, the Corinthians paraded that person as though he was the greatest among them. If someone said that they could speak in the language of heaven, the Corinthians gave that person superstar status. In all kinds of ways, the Corinthians made too much of the spectacular and debated things of Christian life and not enough about the fundamental and non-debatable things of Christian life, such as love. Love is an indisputed and undebatable aspect of Christian life. And this is why we have this love chapter in Corinthians. The apostle well knew, he could see that church in Corinth was well overdue for a reminder to love well. As others have said, Paul was saying that all the most dramatic and wonderful gifts we can imagine are useless without love. And F.F. Bruce, famous again, the most lavish exercise of spiritual gifts cannot compensate for lack of love. So this is what we're jumping into. This is what we're jumping into. A reminder to every generation of Christian believers like you and I, if there is no love among us, we're missing the mark. If there is no love, we're missing the mark. So this being quite a serious issue, let's think about the apostle exposing the ugly underbelly of a lovelessness in the Christian or Corinthian church. In verses 1 to 3, we have all the gritty details. He begins, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." The apostle imagines a situation, and it's probably hypothetical, where someone could learn whatever beautiful and mysterious language might be spoken in heaven. And that person then brings that language down to earth. And that person is still nothing more than a disorientating noise for lack of love. Imagine that, being able to learn whatever language is spoken up in the heavens, bringing that down, and the apostle would say, you're just being noisy because you do not love. He calls that noise a clanging cymbal. I don't know if you've ever been to an orchestra or a music feature of some sort, and there might be a band and then that loud clash of instruments, like a big bang, and the whole room goes silent and everyone's attention is on the noise. The apostle says, even if you have the language of heaven in your possession, but you do not love, you are that noisy sound. You draw everybody's attention, but after that, you have nothing worthwhile to offer. Continuing on from this, Paul said, if he had the fullest of faith in its maximal capacity, such that he could perceive things about God that no one else could, and by his extraordinary faith he could work extraordinary miracles. If he had no love, his contribution to Christianity should be flagged as unimportant. Wow, that's verse 2. I don't know if you find that a stunning admission from the Apostle Paul. I do. He says that big faith is not really the problem, but big faith without love really is a big problem in Christianity. It's a very sharp critique of loveless Christianity by the Apostle. And yet he has more to say. He says in verse 3, if I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. In the first part there, here the apostle imagines himself as an extraordinary, generous Christian. He's making large charitable donations with these sweeping gestures of generosity, the kind of generosity that the newspapers would write about. But even grand generosity without love carries no favor as a Christian virtue. Oh, that's extraordinary, isn't it? As we thought about those couple of verses, it's hard not to escape Paul's point. A lack of love in Christian life is not inconsequential. A lack of love is actually very serious. It's not a small thing, it's a big thing. Notice how he went on to say that even if he died a martyr's death, dying for the cause of Christ, but have not love, that way of death is robbed of its honor. He gains nothing, he said. So if lovelessness is a serious issue, and it really is, we might want to ask, where do we learn Christian love that really matters? Who's going to teach us? Where shall we look for help? Because if we don't look somewhere, we're going to learn a different kind of love, a love that the world is teaching us. We will certainly be learning the smutty love of pop culture. We will be learning the affectionless love of the cold-hearted. We will learn the manipulative love of our ever-changing emotional preferences. We will learn a different kind of love if we don't have someone to teach us true love. And so I'm asking, with so many versions of love floating around, where do we learn true love of Christian faith? This is the question that we begin to answer in verses 4 to 7. And it might sound very familiar to some of you. You might have heard this at weddings. Love is patient and kind, does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. And the apostle goes on, of course. And though familiar, have you ever let those words analyze you? Diagnose you? Have you ever let those words read you instead of you reading them? It's a worthwhile exercise. Love is patient and kind. How are things with your temper? Easily triggered when things don't go your way? When the kids interrupt your nap? When mum and dad uphold their no devices in the bedroom or at the dinner table policy? When a brother or a sister takes the toy that you wanted to play with? You know, personally, I'd like to think that I'm a patient person, but I'm not. There is unfinished work to be done in this area of my life. And sometimes when we recognize that there's this personal work that still needs doing in us by the Spirit of God, we offer all kinds of excuses for not wanting to do the work, for not wanting to have the work done on us. Haven't you found that? I find that to be true. We might say to ourselves or to others, I wasn't brought up with patient love. Dad or mum, man, they had a quick temper, and they passed that down to me, and that's just the way I am. I'm sorry. That's just the way I am. It's what I learned. We appeal to our genetics, our ethnic profile for an excuse. So for instance, I might say I struggle with a patient and a kind love because deep down, at a genetic level, I'm Dutch. And kindness just really isn't my forte. And layered on top of that is this weird French side to my family. So not only am I stubborn, I will fight you with a baguette if I have to. Look, we might give the apostle all kinds of reasons for why we suck at love. But eventually the apostle would kindly remind us, we probably all have excuses to justify our undeveloped love, our childish and immature love. But sooner or later, walk with Jesus long enough, and Jesus is going to ask you to outgrow childish and immature things. Walk with him long enough, and Jesus will ask you to leave some childish things behind. As the apostle himself testified, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. By the Spirit's leading, this can be true of our childish and immature ways with love also. Maybe we are impatient. Maybe unkindness is the only relational tool we ever learnt. But isn't there an invitation here to take off the training wheels, to outgrow the immature things? Isn't this what we as healthy Christians believe anyway? That we don't have to stay enslaved to our vices, even our childish ones? But that the Spirit of God within us is on a mission to present us more and more blameless before the presence of God's glory. So it is possible, by God's grace and by the gift of His Spirit, to grow little by little. It will probably take time, but it is possible to grow little by little in true Christian love. There is so much more we could say about love, and we can even do lots more analysis about our potential shortcomings in love. But I do want to get at the question, if Paul was advocating and trying to convince a Christian church of true Christian love, how did those early Christians, who were no less sinful than we are, learn a new way of love? How did they make progress out of an immature love that was causing chaos among them? And I think the key here, as we go through the traits of love, is that we come to see not just raw and impersonal attributes or qualities of love that you can put in a lab and study. What we come to see is a person. We actually come to see Jesus. Think about this. Who actually loved with patience and kindness? It was Jesus. Whose love never came across arrogant or rude? And rude almost certainly refers here to sexual rudeness, the kind of locker talk that you find among teenage boys. Who was actually never arrogant or rude like that? It was Jesus. Whose love was never irritable? It was Jesus. You know, the text goes on to say that love is not resentful. This speaks of a love which doesn't keep a record of wrongs in order to throw them back in someone's face. We know how unloving that can feel, don't we? We know how unloving that can feel. Maybe you've done some wrong, but you've owned it. You've repented of it, and by the mercy of God, you are slowly finding a new way forward. But someone, somewhere, is keeping a list. And they bring that list out every now and again. They taunt you with it. They won't let you forget. They won't let you move on or grow or be free. They constantly want you to live under the shadow of past shame. If the love which Paul was talking about is a person, Jesus, he's telling us that person does not keep a record of our wrongs. How so? When Jesus went to the cross, he was cancelling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. Meaning Jesus does not have a drawer anywhere full of little post-it notes with all your wrongs written down on it that he's going to bring out and show you one day. They are gone. Your sins are gone forever, never to be remembered, for all eternity. That's some love, isn't it? It's the best kind of love. Imagine being so fully known by a person like that. So when Paul presented these Corinthian Christians with a vision of Christian love, at root he was asking them to learn Jesus. It was their invitation to become serious disciples. Stop kicking tires. Become a serious disciple. So much so that they would absorb his ways of love. And over time, that love becomes second nature to them. As perhaps as one commentator put it, that Paul was inviting these Corinthian Christians to Jesus so deeply that his actions and attitudes are ingrained gradually by constant repetition. That is discipleship, where you learn Jesus so deeply that his actions and his attitudes become ingrained in you. Look, I suppose there will be some Christians who question the value of love. I know this because I have been that Christian who questioned the value of love. To some Christians, talk about love sounds naive. It sounds limp-wristed. It sounds about as useful as wet cardboard. And their question remains, is love really that important? Will this love really work in the real world? Is this love gritty enough to confront the true evils of our world? Maybe these are your objections and questions about love as well. In as much as I'm trying to be helpful to you today, let me mention just two things. Firstly, Paul said the kind of love that he was talking about is a strong love. The love that he's talking about is a strong love. Strong enough to oppose evil without giving evil an inch. Verse 6. Love does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. And that just reminds us here, doesn't it, that the kind of love that the apostle was speaking about wasn't saggy. It's not endlessly accommodating itself to evil in order to appear nice. And we see this in Jesus also. His love accommodates no evil. In fact, it was love that compels him to go and destroy the works of the devil. So don't think that Christian love, described in this chapter, can easily be dismissed as weak or effeminate. It's not that kind of love. It has edges, and it is really fit for the real world. Secondly, I know Christians who do not yet see love as a super important attribute of Christian life. In their estimation, there are other virtues and traits which far outrank love. In circles like ours, it's not uncommon to champion truth, the expository sermon, or the regulative principles as more important aspects of Christian life, or the most important aspects of Christian life. In circles unlike ours, it might be the spectacular, the miracles, the energy, the impromptu vibe of everything that is given super important status. All I'm trying to say is that whatever corner of the Christian world that you are most influenced by, there will always be in-house assumptions of what ought to be the most important and defining aspects of Christian life together. That is unavoidable. All Christian communities will have assumptions about what is most important to them. And all I'm asking us to consider is this. If you were to time travel and ask the Apostle Paul for a list of what is really important in Christian life, he wouldn't downplay truth and the intellect, not by any means. You won't find him bad-mouthing that aspect of Christian life. In fact, he said elsewhere that the teaching ministry of the church is the pillar and buttress of the truth. He esteems those things. And nor would he downplay the true and genuine experiences of spectacular faith. Certainly not. If you read his writings, he documented quite a few of his own. He will not downplay the spectacular experiences of Christian faith. But nor would he downplay love as the lesser virtue of Christian life. Not in the slightest. He began his chapter with a strong assessment. Without love, he would gain nothing. Without love, he would be nothing. Without love, he would be an intolerably noisy Christian. Therefore, love is worth our attention. It really is. It is key. It is central. It is here for us to grow into. And so we must. So we must. If we claim Jesus as Lord, we claim the one who taught us a new commandment. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. And by this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Let's pray together.